Well, what is up, Substance? Make some noise wherever you are at. Come on, you made it to church. And if we haven't met yet, I'm Pastor Peter Haas. And it is Mother's Day, everybody. For real, I want to honor all the moms in the room. Actually, my wife was going to preach today, and she was like, the best gift ever would be to not have to preach on Mother's Day. And I'm like, you're welcome. I've got you. And even to my own mom in the service, it's just like, I'll never forget when my mom taught me how to pray, you guys. I'll never forget it. She said, you better pray that comes out of the carpet. Or I will teach you how to pray. Come on, let's be honest. Very powerful moment for me, Mom. Thank you. That's where I learned prayer. Let's be honest. That's how most of us learned how to pray, right? It's that moment when you better pray your dad doesn't see that new dent in his car. You know what I'm saying? And you're like, oh, God, right? It was that one moment where you got in trouble and you were like, God, I pray if you rescue me from this, I will never do it again. I will be the perfect person. I will never sneak candy into the movie theater. I will always change lanes with my blinker on. Come on. But listen, God isn't dumb. He knows 2 years from now, you'll be sneaking that roll of Rolos into the thing. You'll have your gummy bears that you thought nobody could, the whole theater could hear you open, right? And of course, movie theater soda doesn't make a sound. Everybody knows that, right? You can't, I'm just saying, you can't fool God. You can't fool your mom either, right? Some of you were like, ooh, Mom, I'm just gonna study homework with my friend, as if your mom didn't know. Oh, really? Study homework, right? Oh, homework about who's dating whom? Is that true? Is that what you're studying? Right? You thought you were like, oh, Mom, I know it's really late, but I gotta call my friend. It's about a homework assignment. Oh, as if she didn't know you just had hot gossip burning on your tongue. Come on, people. Come on. Your mom was just being gracious to you. My mom probably closed the door after a lot of those conversations and just literally was like, dear Lord in heaven, have mercy on my son. Ironically, I taught my mom how to pray too. You're welcome, Mom. And no, I'm just saying you better love her today because she knows who you really are and yet still loves you. So I'm just saying, am I right? Can we just give it up for all the moms? And if you're a mom, just pat yourself on the back. I'll tell you, for real, all jokes aside, one of the things I love about being a part of God's church is that those who don't have a mom can be adopted right here. I think about how many spiritual sons and daughters I have adopted here, and I just, even beyond my blood family, I love just being a dad to more people, and that's what I love about church. It's an adoptive family. It's a family that you can opt into. And if you're here today and you don't have that kind of family, I just want to invite you just to, God has all sorts of divine relationships for you here. And so I just encourage you to press in. I know sometimes holidays like this can be a little strange for some people because they feel a little lonely. And the reason why this sticks out to me is I was just reading this last week, a little stat on loneliness, how it's become kind of an epidemic in our country, and it's shortening life expectancy now, okay? So loneliness reduces health to the same degree as smoking a pack of cigarettes every single day. Think about it. What was weird is for most of the last century, life expectancy kept crawling up and up and up and up, and then somewhere in the I think it was early 2012, life expectancy stopped growing for the first time. And then it not only it stopped growing, but it started going downward. And they found that in proportion to our social isolation, if you think about it, we don't have real relationships anymore. We have parasocial relationships through social media, which aren't real, you know what I mean? The average person has less confidants and less family than they ever have in history. And of course, there's the tendency to actually just say, well, maybe we just need to reject family altogether and become reptiles is one option, which is kind of where we've been going. Or we can reacclimate to what this idea of community that God created us to be a part of something bigger. But And the good news, now that's the bad news right there, but the good news is they found, like literally researchers found that church is one of the greatest antidotes to this problem. In fact, they found that regular church attendance and forgiveness, that there was something about these two behaviors put together, reduced loneliness by a grand total of 50%. It was one of the biggest impactors of not just loneliness, but life expectancy. It was and you have to understand, this is a University of Chicago study of people that are not pro-religion, okay? But they found that there's something unique about this. And you guys have heard me share a lot of these stats on how church increases life expectancy, decreases depression, increases sexual fulfillment, all that kind of stuff, educational outcomes. But this was unique because what was unique about it is they also found that church attendees are also the most likely of all the population to engage in forgiveness. And if you don't know what forgiveness is, there's like a lot of people think it's negating justice, but actually it's not. Like I always describe it as forgiveness isn't letting people off the hook, it's letting them off of your hook and putting them on God's hook, okay? So you're not negating justice. This forgive and forget business is not biblical at all. Actually, you're simply removing yourself as the conduit of justice so that you're free to actually live with innocence. It's actually the very toxin that makes you weird. When you think you are the solution to all justice, you eliminate God from the equation, which you were never designed to be. That you were never designed to be the orchestrator of perfect justice. And so in some ways, it's really just like tag teaming your heavenly Father. You're simply saying, God, the same way that I trust you for salvation, for access to heaven, I trust you that in this situation with that person, you are going to bring about perfect, poetic justice. And that's something that God is really, 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 really good at. And here's the deal. I'm the first person to say that's easier said than done, especially when it's family or friends or people close to us. There's moments where it just, to be honest, it feels like God is taking his sweet time. And it's like, what's up with that? Whenever I think about a situation like this, I think of, I'm reminded of a story from history about a young woman by the name of Suki. And it was her nickname growing up. She grew up in the early 1700s. And her father was an academic and loved to teach her all of his books. And so, she was very different than most girls. Instead of growing up learning sewing and cooking, she was one of a handful of girls in the whole world that had already learned Greek and Latin when she was a kid. Okay, so she was extremely learned. She loved hanging out with her dad in his library. He had a vast library, and of course, her dream was to become the first woman ever accepted to study at Oxford. And of course, another one of her dreams was to be one of the first women who had ever been published for her poetry. And of course, people that met her as a teenager instantly was like, oh my gosh, this girl is not only gonna achieve all of that, and more, because she is talented. And everybody could see it from a mile away. And yet, despite her talent, things just didn't pan out the way she had hoped. The Oxford dream, the poetry dream, it wasn't working. Like her father set her up with a young Oxford student by the name of Samuel, thought that they would be a good fit intellectually, but he ended up kind of becoming a dud. He became an Anglican pastor, but he was horrible at it. And it just made him horribly insecure. When you're doing something that you're not designed to do, you become insecure. In fact, actually, the funny thing was Suki was better at preaching than he was, but it was his opportunity. And so the problem was the denomination kept assigning him to these miserable churches that nobody ever wanted to pastor in. And so they spent most of their early marriage living in poverty. And after giving birth to 7 kids, 3 of them ended up tragically dying when they were little kids. I mean, just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And it got so bad that her husband just kind of spiraled into a depression and decided to abandon her and the kids. In fact, not only did he abandon the family, but he wouldn't give him a dime, and he ended up getting thrown in jail. Okay, so a pastor being thrown in jail, this is like double scandal, right? Because not only does she have to carry the reputation of this pastor who had a moral failure, but she's got to also do everything. She's got to milk the cows, farm, cook the food, teach the kids. I mean, talk about a rough season in her life. Now, I bring up her life because I think like a lot of people, I think we've all found ourselves in situations at some point or another, maybe not quite as horrible as maybe hers, but we've all found ourselves in situations where life isn't turning out the way we were hoping. And maybe you're here today and you're like, you know what? For you, it might be a diagnosis. It might be like any number of things. But I think that there's always these moments in life, and I've had many of them, where I just was like, what the heck, God? This is not, like I thought it would look like this. Or maybe you imagined your life would look a certain way by 30 or 40 or 50, and then when you got there, it wasn't looking the way that you planned. And I think in those moments, it can feel depressing, but I say all of this because, church, I want you to hear my heart. This is what you need to hear this straight from me, and it's the heart of God. Whatever it is, if you're going through a rough moment right now, I need you to know it is temporary. I know it feels permanent. You feel like it's always going to feel like this. I'm always going to feel like this. My body's always going to look like this. My marriage is always going to look like this. Listen, God is in the business of reinventing you over and over and over and over again. And I as a person whom God has reinvented, resurrected, he's in the business of resurrecting our lives. I just want you to know, and I need you to know, God sees you. He sees you. He hears you. In fact, it's actually one of his names that we're going to study today. As we dive into a Bible passage, I actually want to show you the passage where God got the name El Roi, the God who sees. And my hope is that by the end of today, that some of you, whatever it is you're going through, you're gonna have a different perspective about what the Lord is actually doing. In Genesis 16, we actually read about the story where God got this name. It's about a young mom by the name of Hagar who is in a similar situation of hardship to Suki here, who except unlike this lady, she started running away from her problems. And how many of you know you can't outrun your problems? There's something about your problems where they tend to track you down. And I say this because the best way to deal with your problems is to run towards God, not from your problems, right? But of course, Hagar was running from her problems. And so, of course, in Genesis 16, and I'm going to read this passage, he basically tells her, an angel of the Lord basically shows up and says, I want you to go back and embrace the difficulty. I want you to stop running, Hagar. I want you to embrace the difficulty, which was not what she wanted to hear, but it's what she needed to hear. And then check out what happened next, okay? So in verse 10, Genesis 16:10, the angel added, he's like, listen, if you go back and you embrace the difficulty, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. And you have to understand, in the ancient world, descendants, this is like your health insurance, this is your wealth. This is basically like God saying, hey, listen, I am going to take care of all your needs, right? So if you go back and embrace this pain now, I'm going to enable you to live like no one else later. And the angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now with child, and you will have a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. So think about it. He wanted her every single time that she looks at her son, she knows, oh, this is the God who hears. That's why he had her name her son Ishmael, right? For the Lord has heard your cry of distress. Okay, now what's crazy about this, so you keep reading, skip down to verse 13. She gave this name to the Lord. So she gives the name to her son Ishmael, the God who hears, but then she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me, El Roi. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. It's this interesting kind of passage where she becomes aware of just how much God is seeing and how much God is listening. And I think it's a profound passage for all of us because there's moments in our lives where we're like, God, are you seeing? Are you listening? Or are you just not willing to help me? Are you not generous? All these types of questions enter into our minds. But listen, so she has this profound encounter with God, the God who sees. She names God the God who sees. And then what I love about this passage that a lot of people miss is she gives God this beautiful name, and yet clearly God sees, right? He hears, but then it also says this: the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring. It says in verse 7. What's interesting about that is that God had been pursuing her all along. She's wondering if God sees, if God hears, but actually she was the one running. God was the one pursuing after her. And I want you to know this. God has been pursuing you too. He has been running after you. He has been chasing you. He's got insights for you. He's things that he's heard, things that he's seen, things that he's chasing you down with. You thought that God was nowhere near you, but actually you were nowhere near God. You were running the opposite direction from him. And again, 5 chapters later, now watch this, because this is merely a setup for the thing that God does next in Hagar's life, right? So he's been proactively pursuing her. 5 chapters later, she has this boy, and this boy is now about 13 years old, scholars believe, in chapter 21. Just when she thinks that it could not get any worse, she finds herself in a situation where she's out in the middle of the desert, and both she and her son are about to die of dehydration. Her son ends up collapsing, and so she just falls to her knees and was just like, I cannot watch this boy die. And as she sat there nearby, she began to sob. And God heard the boy crying, and the angel of the Lord called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What's the matter, Hagar? Don't be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Some of you, you're worried about your kids today, and you're worried about your future, and I just believe that God would actually just say, come on, get up. I want you to get up. I want you to re-engage your kids. I want you to, because this is a God who hears, this is a God who sees, and this is a God who has so many promises that he's just waiting to unveil in your life. Because what's fascinating about, here we have 2 different stories of the same young mom, and both times God tells her things that she doesn't want to hear. Both times God tells her to go back to the situation that she's already given up on. In chapter 16, she had given up on her mistreatment, her family situation. In chapter 21, God was like, go back to your boy, the boy that you don't want to see dying. Yeah, I get it, Hagar, but I need you to go back. And the moment she went back to her son, she re-engaged the problem, right? When she literally set the boy up like she was gonna, like she was gonna save him, like they're gonna walk again. This is what it says. Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. Okay, so now just stop here for a second, okay? Then, it was the moment she submitted that all of a sudden her eyes were open. If I could put it this way, her submission became her illumination. It was only when she obeyed and re-engaged the problem that all of a sudden she got clarity about what God was doing in her life. Ironically, it's actually quite poetic that the God who sees is the one who gave her sight, right? Then God opened her eyes. But where did it start? It started by her obeying a tough request. Now, okay, so now in both passages, I want to point out a process, and it's so critical you get this. If you hear anything today, this is what I want you to understand. There's a process God took her through twice, and it was very clear. Hagar, I want you to obey me, and I'm going to ask you to make a step of sacrifice, and if you do it, I'm going to give you vision for your life, and it's going to result in a miracle as well, provision for your life. Obedience first, vision, then provision, right? Inconvenience, clarity, miracles. If you think about it, and again, in Genesis 16:9, he says, go back to your mistress and submit to her. Obedience, right? Then the angel added, I will increase your descendants. There'll be too many to count. Vision. Then the angel said, and you are now with child, right? Provision. Obedience, vision, provision. And then in Genesis 21, same thing. Lift up the boy, take him by the hand. Obedience. For I will make him into a great nation. Vision. She gets vision for her life. Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. Provision, okay? There was a sequence that kicked off a series of miracles, and both times it required with an inconvenient step of obedience. Now, a lot of times we like to switch it, right? We like to put obedience at the end. God, show me your miracle, and then I'll sacrifice. But let's be honest, that's not faith. That's not faith. And the reason why God does this is not because he's mean. It's not because he wants you to suffer, but because he wants you to learn how to flex that faith muscle, because if you don't, you will never have the vision and ultimately the provision that you so desperately claim to want, right? It's kind of like, and God has done this in my life so many times. I've watched him do this in my life so many times. I remember like when Carolyn and I were gonna move here to plant this church, he put this vision on our hearts that we're gonna move to the Twin Cities, and we wanted to plant a life-giving church that could completely alter the spiritual DNA of the Twin Cities over our lifetime. And we just really believed that the Lord was calling us to do this. But you have to understand, we had a very, very cushy position at a church. We had a K through 12 at our church. We had like 75 acres of land. It was almost all paid off. I had a very cushy job that I could have stayed there and just had fun, right? Free tuition for my kids, all of that. And yet I knew if I stayed there, I would never be happy. And yet it felt so dumb. Like when I told my board that I was gonna do this, they were all like, why would you do this? Of course, I had like 72 different people that applied for my job, right? And I took the church through, a full search process, and we handed it off. And I remember I was fundraising for substance, and it was going terrible because I'm like a horrible fundraiser, right? I mean, like, I hate asking people for money. I'm like, I'm not the best salesman. Maybe I can stand up and talk in front of people, but man, no money was coming in for the church. The goal was that I was gonna try to fundraise 30 grand for my salary. And I knew that poverty level in the Twin Cities at the time was like 27 grand, and I thought, 27 plus 3 grand, right? I thought like I'm beyond poverty, right? But we were a family of 4 at the time, and Carolyn and I were both gonna work full time for the church, right? So, I thought if I can just, fundraise 30 grand for that first year, we'll get the thing started, and yet nothing was coming in. It was like, I think we had raised like 12 grand, and most of that came from my grandma, which how many of you know that was pity money? She was just like, oh, loved ones, like she was just being generous to me because like, if your mama calls you beautiful, it doesn't make you a supermodel, they say. And same thing with a church planting. If it all comes from your grandma, that's probably a sign you shouldn't be planting, right? But I was freaking out. I mean, we were like 3 months away from moving to Minneapolis. I'm about to pay 100 grand more for a downgrade in house so that I can live at poverty level to plant a church. And all these guys that were applying for my position, I remember at this last moment, like kind of freaking out, like, wait, I don't want to resign after all. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I'm making a mistake, like if I could take it back, right? And yet I knew that was not what the Lord wanted. It was obedience, vision, provision. And so in that, whenever I'm having those freak out moments, I stop and I just like ask God, what is the next step of obedience? What do you need me to know? What do you want me to do? And so I just started praying, and I really believe that God has a similar thing for you. If you feel stuck today, best thing you can do is just quiet your soul and just let God give you that little nudge. And sometimes he'll impress upon your conscience. For some of you, like we had a whole lot of people come out to our newcomers dinner this last week. Anybody that wants to get integrated at our church, first Sunday of every month, we always do a newcomers dinner. And of course, all these people came out, and there were so many of them that just said, I just felt this nudge. I just knew this was my next step. And I love hearing that, because sometimes it's just that next step. Sometimes it's just like, go to that small group, or Try another small group. Yeah, that last one was a little weird. Go to the next one. You know what I'm saying? Like, just that little nudge can make a big difference. And so I was just waiting in prayer for that nudge. Like, God, what do you want me to do? And I felt this impression from the Holy Spirit. Peter, you really want to know what you need to do right now. If you want to fundraise, if you want to fundraise, you reap what you sow. I want you to think about that one church planner who launched a while back. I want you to go and write them a check for $3,000. And I was like, $3,000? Like, time out, God. Like, that's insane. Don't you realize I'm the one who needs the money, right? I'm the church planner, right? I'm like, I need to be giving that money to myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, God, I don't know if you know this. Have you ever instructed God before, like where you just started ranting at him? God, I don't know if you know this. The whole reason why I'm praying to you is because I'm $18,000 shy of poverty level. Poverty level's here. I already am 1,800. Now you want me to go 21 under? Like by writing a check to somebody? I mean, I'm dreaming of poverty. If you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, well, despite all my melodrama, I knew what the Lord called me to do. And so I'm like, okay. Let's do it. Let's write the check. And I wrote it out to this church planner, right? And of course, you know what was funny is this church planner who I gave the money to, he was like, he's like, Peter, what are you doing? Like, you need this money. And I'm like, I felt like the Lord wanted me to obey him, and I'm giving you this money. And he was so blessed by it. And as we were talking, well, guess what? That guy was the church planter who essentially introduced me to a brand new startup organization called the ARC, which is a church planting organization that gives startup capital to church planters. And he basically got me connected. And then the ARC, at the time, they had only launched about 2 churches, right? So they're brand new. Well, guess what? That organization ended up giving me $30,000, people. Exactly tenfold the amount that I gave to that church planner. And then that church planner ended up giving me money. And then, everything completely reversed. And then, as I looked back on what God did in my life, I saw it. Obedience, vision, provision, right? But most of us, we don't want that sequence. We want to flip it, right? God, you show me the provision, then I'll obey. Well, why would God ever do that? He'd be enabling you to not walk by faith. You know what I'm saying? We all claim as Christians that we are a man or woman of faith, but actually every opportunity we have to flex our faith muscles, we don't want to do it. In fact, we get mad at God for even letting us do it, as if somehow God is at fault. And we're like, God, are you even seeing this? And guess what? Most of the time, he's asking right back, no, are you seeing this? That's actually the problem. It's not my sight that's the problem, it's your sight. It's not my hearing that's the problem, it's your hearing. You know what I'm saying, right? I started out by telling you in the very beginning of this message about that woman, Suki, in the 1700s, the girl with all the brains, but her husband. Let me finish the story, because this is actually where it gets fascinating. Her husband gets out of jail, he comes home, and he's begging to reconcile with her. He realized that he completely screwed up. He realized that he had been spiraling, and he truly repented, and he devoted his life back to his wife and even just ministry. Well, the sad thing is things didn't go very well for them the second time either. Their house burned down. They had a couple more kids, and another couple of kids died when they were young. And worst of all things happened. He ended up having a terrible stroke and could never work again. And that poor woman had to not only take care of an entire house of kids, but take care of a severely disabled husband who lingered on for another 7 years before he died. And by this point, you're like, Pastor, you are depressing me. Why in the world would anybody be telling her depressing story 300 years later? And here's why. That young girl named Suki also went by another name, Susanna Wesley. Believe it or not, she went on to become one of the most influential women in all of history. I mean, think about it. Her one son, Charles, ended up becoming one of the most famous poets and songwriters of the last 300 years. He wrote over 9,000 poems and songs that are sung in churches all the way up into this day. In fact, his worship music dominated Western churches for the last couple hundred years. Her other son, John Wesley, ended up starting a revival in Great Britain and in America that not only started a worldwide movement called the Methodists, that you've probably heard before, but many historians actually quote his writings as influencing all of the founding fathers that started the Revolutionary War. In fact, America, most historians say America would not exist as a modern democracy were it not for the biblical teaching of John Wesley and the Methodists starting America on fire for God. In fact, still another one of her sons, Samuel Jr., became one of England's greatest scholars. One of her daughters, Hetty, became a famous female poet, one of the first females to become published. Still, two of her other daughters became prominent educators at a time when it was unheard of for women to climb the ranks. I mean, I think it suffices to say that this poverty-stricken single mom became one of the most influential women of all history. Now, I'm sharing this because I think we all have this weird, dreaded lie that we all believe that we're the only ones experiencing setback. We all have this tendency to believe this idea that we're the only ones experiencing chaos, and yet when you look at Susanna Wesley's life through a 10-year lens, you know what? You could probably make that case that her life was really miserable in that window. But yet, at the same time, if you zoom back and you look at the big picture, I'm telling you, her life was wildly successful. In fact, God fulfilled almost all of her dreams. She got to do all sorts of crazy things that she never thought she would be able to do. It just wasn't in her timeline. And you know, and I say this, well, what's the difference? It's perspective. If she could have just, if we could just step back from our lives and see what the Lord actually has planned for us, some of you would just stop freaking out and you'd take a big old chillax pill today. You know what I'm saying? And yet, I think that's actually God's word for some of you. He's longing to show you what's possible by the end of your life. Now, God isn't gonna just show you the big picture, because then you would stop flexing your faith muscle, wouldn't you? Right? If he showed you with total clarity all the things he's planned for you, some of you would literally just turn into a couch potato, right? You'd stop praying. You'd be, it's gonna happen, right? But I do believe that God does wanna give you enough hope to keep you out of the ditch. And some of you, that's where you are right now. And here's why I know God longs to show you this perspective. Let me give you one last scripture. Isaiah 46:9. I am God and there's none like me. Watch this. I make known the end from the beginning. He wants to make known the end. That's who he is. That's what he does. From ancient times, what is still to come. He longs to show you what is to come, give you hope for a future. That's why he says, call to me and I'll answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you don't know. Or he says in Psalm 25, he confides in those who fear him. Listen, if we could see things from God's perspective right now, many of us would actually see that half of the prayers we're praying are just downright silly, right? I mean, people say this all the time. I just want promotion at work. I know if I could just get promoted, my whole life would get simpler. What? When has promotion ever made your life simpler? Literally, every promotion in my life has actually made my life more complex, more stressful. Promotion never makes your life simpler. Where did you get that idea? Stop praying that. If you want your life to be simpler, stop praying for promotion, right? It's like they even found it even with income level. The moment it goes over a certain level, you just become more miserable, right? All the science is out there, and yet everybody's like, well, I might be the exception. You know what I'm saying? What if, right? And you know, it's like we forget, hey, listen, a dream house still has just extra square footage to clean and a larger mortgage payment, people. You may have a dream marriage, but guess what? A dream marriage still has maintenance. It still requires therapy. It still requires date nights. It still requires workouts. It still requires marriage enrichment. You can't just have something without maintaining it, right? And half the time, I think God is looking down from heaven at a lot of our prayers saying, loved ones, you don't even know what you want, right? He looks at our list of 20 dreams and he's like, what he would actually share with us if we were listening is he would look at our list of 20 dreams and he would say, you know, the only reason why you want dream number 12 is because you're insecure. Actually, if you could just deal with that, then we could just simplify your life altogether. And by the way, dream 16, it's actually your overreaction to this childhood wound, but you just don't want to deal with that right now. So that's another big baggage thing that you're carrying. And dream number 5, I actually want that for you, but it's meant to be dream number 20. It's for later in life, but you're so impatient that you're trying to make it happen, and as a result, you're cutting off a dozen other dreams. And dream number 8, well, I did that one just so you could get over that one. Gabriel, that was a really weird phase, wasn't it? You know what I'm saying? But you needed to know I was real, so I did it, right? I think God would actually say a lot of these things to us that would all of a sudden give us perspective and cause us to step back and say, okay, God, listen, not my will, but yours be done. But sometimes that takes a moment with God where we have to have that divine exchange. And so I just want to welcome you into that kind of relationship with God, because that's what he wants with you. You realize that, right? He wants to have a relationship where he can clarify these types of things. And the one last thing I just wanted to say that I forgot to share about Susanna Wesley is how she coped with that chaos in those low moments. When she was single momming it with all these kids, again, she's in a small mud house, going nuts, homeschooling, farming, and there was this one time where she was so overwhelmed, history tells us that she just took her apron and pulled it up over her head and would just cry out to the Lord, God help me, over and over and over and over again. And how many of you know that can be one of the greatest prayers ever, God help me? In fact, actually, after she pulled the apron over her head the first time, she decided, you know what, this is my only escape in life. It became a ritual, and she even taught her kids, okay? I love this. She taught her kids, if you see mommy with an apron over her head, that means don't bother mommy, she's visiting with Jesus. And if you do bother mommy, you will visit Jesus. No, she didn't say that, right? Like, sorry. If mommy covers your head with an apron, it's a really bad day, okay? Sorry, that got really dark really fast. She never would have said that. But you get the idea. She was just trying to meet with God, right? She was trying to connect with the Lord. She was surrendering her chaos. And listen, some of you, I think that's the greatest gift that you could get today is just surrendering that chaos to God and allowing him to replace it with something much better, a little moment of obedience that will all of a sudden give birth to vision, that will all of a sudden give birth to provision. God wants to give you the same miracle as he gave Hagar, but I do believe that it begins with a divine exchange, with a small act of obedience. You know, in those moments, Susanna Wesley was able to get reassured by the Lord, hey, you may not be the first female Oxford scholar, but you know what, your kids will. And they're gonna drag you all over the place and sing your praise and publish your book later, right? I say this because there's not a single dream in my life that took place in the time that I wanted it, but when it did happen, it was better than I could have expected. And if I could just encourage you all just to let God do his timing and just trust him. And so just would you close your eyes, bow your heads, and let's just do business. Lord, you see every person in this room, and you know the end from the beginning. And we just make the decision right here today to take whatever is stressing us out, and we're gonna lay it down before you. And we just acknowledge by faith, you are orchestrating a life for us that is so beautiful that we would hardly be able to believe it. And yet, God, you are still calling us to take that step of faith right here and now. And so, Father, just between us and you, we trust you. In fact, actually, church, could you just repeat that after me? Just say this. Say, we trust you. Father, you hear our prayers. Maybe you're here today and you've never given your life over to Christ, or you have, but it's time for that reset. Let's just all rededicate our lives to Christ by repeating this after me. Just say this. Say, dear Jesus, would you forgive me? Would you renew me? And would you lead me? I trust you. In Jesus' holy name. If you agree with that prayer, say amen. Oh, loved ones, if you could only know how much he loves you. With all that said, though, we're gonna go into a little more worship, and I just want you to continue doing business with God. But before we do that, we're gonna have our campus pastors come on up and tell us where we're gonna go next. Love you guys.